Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics, and in this video we're going to be looking at stocking options for a 29-gallon fish tank. It's a great size, it offers us a little bit of flexibility, and so in this video we're going to break it down into three parts. The first part, we're going to look at some community fish that often work nicely together. In the second part, I want to talk about some species-only type tanks that can be really cool if you want to switch it up. And in the third part, I just want to mention a few fish that are commonly kept in a 29-gallon tank, but that might be a bad idea long term. By the way, if you want even more stocking options, check out our videos on the 20, the 10-gallon, the 5.5, the 2.5. All of those fish will fit nicely in a 29-gallon. You can probably just add a little bit more. Also, if you're looking for more information on some of the fish featured in this video, check out the description below. We'll have some species profiles down there, and you can learn a lot more about their feeding and their care and how to breed them. Hope you enjoy the video. So I figured the first thing we'd do is let's go ahead and start with the cleanup crew that would be really good for a 29-gallon. I really like cory cats. There's so many different types. Now, if you're going to keep them, ideally, I would keep them in about a group of 6 or so in a 29, and that's really when you're going to see a lot of their super cool behavior. And I know this is a common fish, but they really are awesome. And if you're looking for that community tank where you're not going to have fish beating up on one another, the cory cat can be a really awesome addition. And again, because there is so much variety, it's really easy to find something that you like. So a cory cat is definitely on the top of my list when it comes to the cleanup crew for my 29-gallon. Now, they're going to take care of stuff on the substrate. You also might want to consider something that's going to take care of potential algae issues, and for that I turn my attention to the bristlenose pleco. I really like these fish because there is just so much variety. Here you're seeing a long fin variety, and they've got the browns, they've got albinos, green dragons. There's just so many. The super red bristlenose. And what's nice about them is they stay relatively small, so maybe the males will top out at around 5 inches or so, and one of them should be sufficient for a 29-gallon, which is, I like that a lot. And again, we're dealing with a fish that's not going to be aggressive, it's not going to pick on other fish, and it's just going to get along very nicely in that community tank. Now, if you want something besides a fish to do some cleanup for you, mystery snails can be a great addition. Here you're looking at some gold mystery snails, but again, this is the type of inhabitant where there's lots of different kinds. There's the golds, there's the blues, there's different kinds with stripes and all kinds of things. So a mystery snail might be a really good addition. They can breed too in freshwater. Nearite snails, they won't breed in freshwater, but they're also very cool. So let's talk a little bit about some of the fish that you could get in a 29, again, that are going to be good community fish. I really like these. I really like hatchet fish, especially if you're looking for fish that are going to be near the top of the tank. As you can see here, there's a couple different varieties. I think the marbled hatchet fish might be a better option, and with those they're going to be a little bit smaller, but they're going to hang out near the top of the tank, which is pretty cool. Now, for some of these fish, we do have species profiles. I will put that in the description below if you want more information. I think small tetras can be a really great addition to a 29-gallon, and again, I emphasize small. So here we're looking at cardinal tetras. The neon tetras that you're seeing here would be another really good example. But when you're looking at tetras, I would stay with something that's maybe going to be around an inch or so. A fish where you can put in a dozen in a 29-gallon and they're not looking cramped. If you're going to keep these smaller tetras, it's best to keep them in larger groups, and I would say a dozen is probably a minimum. So we're going to stay away from some of the larger tetras, because to keep that many in a tank without looking crowded, you're going to want to stay on the smaller side, and I think these are really good examples. And of course, you've got the black neons as well. Those are the fish in the upper right-hand corner. I find them to be very hardy fish, and so it's a great addition to any tank. Now, one of the things you're going to want to keep in mind, do your homework in terms of what the water parameters are for these fish, their ideal water parameters, tank mates. But most of the fish that we're looking at here so far, including these ember tetras, these are really good community fish. Just keep them in larger groups. This is one of my all-time favorite tetras. This is the Von Rio tetra. Really cool if you could add 12 or so. Here we're looking at some more in a 29-gallon. This will give a lot of color, and it's not quite as common as some of the neons or the cardinal tetras out there. And again, what's nice about them is they stay relatively small, so you don't have to worry about them outgrowing a 29-gallon. With a 29-gallon, we're getting to a size where it's the same length and width as a 20 long, but now we're getting a little extra height, and so that extra 9 gallons is really in the height. So we want to be a little bit careful about the size of the fish that we choose and making sure that we have appropriate numbers. I really like rasboras in general, and I think this could be a wonderful addition. Here we're looking at galaxy rasboras, also some lamp-eye rasboras. These fish stay very small, and again, they are not aggressive, so they're going to fit in well with the other fish that we've mentioned so far. And because they stay so small, you might easily be able to put 12 or 15 in a 29-gallon tank and really have some nice color to go along. There's the lamp eyes that you see right here. We've had these in a 20 long. This happens to be a 12-gallon long that you're looking at, and they have been working out very well. You got a half dozen of each of them in this 12-gallon. Plenty of space for them because they stay so small. And of course, you could also look at the standbys like the pork chop rasboras, the harlequin rasboras. They're going to get a little bit larger than the ones we saw, but they have really nice red color. We're looking at a half a dozen here, and this is a 29-gallon, and you can see Cory cats on the right-hand side, but this is a really good option for that 29-gallon tank. And if you want to stay with that community feel, platies can be a great addition. There's lots of different colors of platies, and I know they're very common. Same thing with guppies. Look at these guppies. A lot of action. They're going to inhabit the entire height of the tank. You can see a guppy tank here. So I know the guppies are common, but if you want to add a lot of color into a community tank, and these would fit in well with all the fish that we've talked about so far. You're going to get a lot of color, a lot of action, the potential there for breeding, and not having the males and females get overly aggressive when they do it. This can be a really good addition. Here we're looking at some endlers. Again, another really good option. We've talked about the fish that can exist in a school or a group. Well, what about those single showcase types of fish? You just saw the honey gourami. Rams, certainly a great addition, and there are lots of different types of rams with really cool color. Now, if I were going to keep a cichlid like a ram, or later on we'll talk about crebensis and apistos, perhaps the best thing to do in a 29, if you want a community 29, is think about only keeping one ram or one crib or one apisto in that tank. Let that be the showpiece, the centerpiece fish of that tank, and don't get a group of them. The risk that we run if we keep a group of them in a smaller tank like a 29 with other community fish that I've already mentioned, if they start to breed, all of a sudden that community tank takes on a very different feel, and now they're protecting fry, and a lot of your very unaggressive fish that we've talked about so far wind up getting pushed into the corners of the tank. They might wind up being killed. So we want to avoid that with the rams, the apistos, the crebensis. It's best if you're going to keep them in a community setting, just keep one of them. And even mixing an apisto with a ram or a crebensis in a 29, sometimes that'll work, but they are cichlids, and every once in a while they will vie for the top spot in the tank. So just keep that in mind. So it would be best, in my opinion, especially if you're new to fish keeping, just keep one of them. They're going to be awesome. They're going to show a lot of color, have a lot of personality, and they will be kind of the king of the tank or queen of the tank, and it's going to be really cool. But there are so many varieties of rams, and here we're looking at different types of apistos. Certainly there will be at least one that you like that can really show off in a 29 gallon. So maybe you want to do something a little bit different. Instead of a community tank, maybe have some kind of a tank that's got one type of organism. So shrimp might be a really good option. I hesitate putting shrimp in a tank with any of the fish that I've mentioned so far, with the exception of maybe the rasboras, because they're so small they're probably not going to prey on adult-sized shrimp, but they will consume the babies. But if you wanted to do a 29-gallon all-shrimp tank, that could be really cool. Lots of different types. We're looking at cherry shrimp right here. We've got blue dream shrimp, which are really cool. So there are a lot of different types. What we're looking at here are Neocaridina, which they're a little bit more tolerant of water parameters. The Caridina, those are going to be a little bit less tolerant. So if you're just starting out and you wanted to do a shrimp only tank, that could be a really cool option. You just want to make sure. I would just start out with the shrimp. Now, the one thing that we have had success doing is mixing shrimp with bristlenose plecos. Not everybody has that kind of success, but we do it in almost all of our shrimp tanks, and we have zero problems, and both of them wind up breeding. But the shrimp just in and of themselves can be a really interesting thing to watch. Now up to this point, I really haven't mentioned very many African cichlids, but these are some that I think would work in a 29. The Maltese, these are shell dwellers. They're going to stay very small, somewhere around that 1.5 inch, 1.75 inch maximum range for the males. So you could put a group of, half a dozen in the 29 gallon with some rock work and some shells and let them populate the tank, which can be kind of fun. They have a really cool group dynamic. This is a 50-gallon lowboy that we're looking at. The gold ocellatus, I would say these are less for a beginner, but if someone who's been into cichlids for a little while wanted to try gold ocellatus at 29, you could certainly keep a pair in there and watch them breed. You could potentially keep multiples. This is a 10-gallon holding tank for these fish, but we've been breeding them in a 20 long, which has the same dimensions as a 29, just a little bit shorter. But a lot of the shell dwellers would work out okay, such as the Maltese that you're seeing or the gold ocellatus that you're seeing right now. Again, I would do that as a species only tank. I wouldn't mix other types of fish. This is actually a 20-gallon that has caudal punctatus, but certainly this could work in a 29. Actually give them a little bit more space. As you can see here, they're growing up just fine. Now this is all fry we had 2 pairs in here and they produced a lot of fry that have been growing up together, but really kind of a cool tank. But again, I would be careful with the types of fish you mix. We can get away with doing bristlenose plecos from time to time, but that's about it. You could also look at, if you're into African cichlids or want to try something different, the Juliochromis. This is Juliochromis ornatus. These are rock dwellers, and once again, in a 29, I would just keep it as a species only tank, but these are absolutely beautiful fish. Right now, what you're seeing, they are in a 20 long, so again, same dimensions, just not as tall, and they really don't use that height, so in some ways, the height is wasted on a fish like a Juliochromis or the shell dwellers that I've already shown you. They like to hang out in the rocks and closer to the substrate, but these are absolutely beautiful fish. Here's some other examples. The orange fish, the Neolamprologus lelupi, those are cool, and then the Transcriptus that you see here, another really cool fish. Both of them would prefer to be around rock work. In a 29, once again, I would just leave this as a species only tank. If you wanted to try something new, it could certainly be a really cool tank. I'd like to end this video talking about a couple fish I probably wouldn't keep in a 29. And I know one of the popular ones are angelfish. They're really awesome. The problem with angelfish is they tend to get fairly large as they age. In a 29 gallon, you're really pushing the minimum limits in terms of angelfish. Their overall height, they get pretty tall. And for me personally, I don't feel comfortable keeping them in a 29 long term. I would much rather have something like a 40 breeder or even a 55 gallon for them. This here, I put this here because the other thing you want to consider is not putting larger tetras in a 29 gallon. Yes, I know that they can be relatively mellow. This happens to be a 125, and these aren't huge fish, but again, you want to keep your tetras in large groups, and that can be tough in a smaller tank. Mollies, something I probably wouldn't do in a 29. I'm not saying you're guaranteed to have problems, but mollies can actually be somewhat aggressive sometime, and we're looking at a lot of cool mollies right now. I just personally feel they're better off in a larger tank like a 40 gallon breeder or above. People have had success keeping mollies in 29s, I'm aware of that, but when they become full size, and by the way, some of these mollies can get 4 or 5 inches, they can become a little bit more territorial, especially with some of your community fish. So we're seeing a lot. Swordtails would be another one. Sometimes the males can be a little bit rough, at least in my experience. Even in larger tanks, sometimes male swordtails will become a little bit territorial, not all the time. But again, if you're looking for that community setting, the mollies and the swordtails might mess that up a little bit for you. Barbs, I don't like most barbs in a smaller tank like a 29. They're best in large groups. Tiger barbs, if you can get dozens of them, or gouramis like you see here, the full-size gouramis like the golds and the opalines. But the barbs can be fin nippers. They can get pretty mean with one another, and if you wind up with a pack like this, like a half a dozen, often what happens is they pick each other off until you only have one left. So you might want to think about staying away from some of the barbs. Here's another example, just because they can be a little rough on one another, again, unless they're in a large group. Most African cichlids, other than the ones I've already mentioned, especially from Lake Malawi, probably not a good idea in a 29. Sometimes they'll tolerate one another when they're smaller, but as they start to breed and exercise their dominance as full-grown adults, that can be a little bit tricky unless you're really experienced. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it gives you some ideas. If it did, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.